This is the Classic Auto Mall Show. Broadcast from the studios inside the Classic Auto Mall in Morgantown, Pennsylvania. Just 1 hour west of Philadelphia at Pennsylvania Turnpike exit 298. Featuring nearly 1,000 classic, vintage, and barn-find vehicles for sale under one climate-controlled roof. Now, here's your host, Classic Auto Mall president and the man with all the toys, Stewart Howden.
And welcome, show number 179, and we're all recuperating from whatever this crud that's going around here. I guess I had pneumonia.
Oh,
so
wow.
I actually went to the doctor, and they took an X-ray, and they go, "Oh yeah, you've got pneumonia." I go, "Well, what does that mean different than when you thought it was bronchial?" They go, "Oh, it's the same treatment." Well, that makes me feel good or bad. Although I have lost 14 pounds.
Well, there you go.
And I think it has to do more with the not drinking the red wine than anything else.
Well, you get back on that wagon.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Right back on.
But you hear that, honey? He said, Steve says it's okay that I go back on the wagon.
I got a little something in my coffee here, maybe you like.
I like that a lot. So before we get to our wonderful guests, let's. Anybody care to guess how many cars exactly in inventory right now, Steve?
Well, I forgot where we were last week, but I'll tell you 1079.
I'll say 1,052.
Well, how about JR? 1,056 we have in the building right now.
Nice.
Way to go.
Wow.
All right.
That's impressive.
Finally, I won.
I think I would know exactly.
Yeah, you get a hat or whatever else we have to give away. We have cool stuff, so we'll give it away. Anyway, let's get right to less jibber jab and talk to our fantastic guest, Mr. Skip Barber, joining us from Connecticut this morning. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, and I have 12 cars in my garage, and I'm feeling kind of small.
Well, it's all relative, as apparently people tell me. So what's your favorite you got in your garage right now?
To give me time to think of that answer. I have in that small number, I have a variety of cars.
Right.
I don't have just something.
Right.
So I got an odd car recently that none of your audience will have ever heard of. It's a pre-World War II BMW two-seater beautiful sports car. It's called a 327.
Wow.
And I had never seen one.
Right.
Long nose, short roof, roof,
right,
drop top. Absolutely spectacular to look at. Wild paint job, multi-colors, 3 colors.
Right.
Anyhow.
Well, those pre-war BMWs are amazing cars, and there are so many of them. You're exactly right. There are so many of them that I see from time to time at a show or an event or in a magazine that I've never heard of, never seen, never realized that it was even a thing.
Right.
And they were making cars, pre-war, many moons ago. So great cars and fun to watch. Well, I think 12 is a good number, though. It's a nice even number. So.
And they fit in my garage.
And they fit in your garage. That becomes the biggest thing. I can't tell you how many people buy a car from us and they go, "Oh, wait, I'm going to have to measure it. If it's too long, it's not going to be able to fit in my garage." And of course, what we can't figure out is cars were so big back in the 60s, yet houses built in the 60s have teeny garages. We're not sure where the disconnect happened there.
Correct. I have one of them. I have a 1957 Cadillac Biarritz convertible.
Nice.
Last year, the single headlights. It's a beautiful car. I mean, most of us sports car people would laugh at that.
Sure.
It's a beautiful car, but boy, it takes up all the room. Yeah. Hey, I apologize for my phone. That's on the fax machine, and I didn't think to turn it off.
Well, our listeners won't know what a fax machine is anyway, so I'll never forget when we started this business in 2018. I was talking about a fax machine, and my business partner said, "Nobody uses fax machines anymore." And I said, "Oh, you are incorrect. There are still lots of people who use fax machines. We still get faxes into today." So we'll ignore that and say it must be a new big contract coming through anyway, right?
Right. Well, I can tell you, everybody that sells metal roofs use fax machines.
Really?
Yes, and repeatedly fax me, and I don't have a metal roof.
But they want you to have one, right?
Right.
That's the whole idea. So we were talking before we went on the air. You're from this part of the world. You're from Philly, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Philadelphia. Yeah.
And what year did you move to Connecticut?
I moved to Connecticut in 1955.
Wow.
And when they were showing the news recently about the plane crash in Philadelphia, for the first time ever, I saw the street I grew up on the news. Wow. Then it was in a small farming community. Now, not so nice.
A whole different world out there. It's my business partner grew up in Norristown, and it was all farmland. And of course, it's not that anymore at all. You wouldn't even recognize it probably when you go back, which is, it's progress, but darn it, you hate to see things go by the wayside, but a little bit out of my control and yours, I guess, as well, too. So you moved up to Connecticut, and were you always into racing? I mean, were you into cars as a kid, like all of us, and just really took it to a career?
Yes. Yeah. I moved to Connecticut. I moved to Massachusetts to go to college. And after that, I lived briefly in Philadelphia. Then I moved to Connecticut. I moved to be near the Lime Rock racetrack, which is in northwestern Connecticut, up towards Albany.
Right. Yeah, you're
and I'm still here.
It's still here after all these years, right? Well, and I mean, an amazing track. And is it Lakeville, Connecticut? Is that the town that it's in?
Yeah.
It's just an amazing track. And the amazing thing about it is that you, after all these years, never, so many people want to make it bigger and expand and longer and this and that. And you always kept it true to its roots. And I think that is admirable that you did that, because I'm sure the temptation was always there to maybe do something bigger, better, greater, grander, whatever.
Well, that's a nice comment. The sad thing is our local planning and zoning board probably wouldn't have allowed any of that.
Gotcha.
And maybe we got lucky that way.
Maybe. I mean, we see a lot of businesses that don't expand and don't grow with the times that are still here. And the ones that tried to grow and expand and be something maybe that they weren't, they're long gone. So, and Lime Rock was one of the first road courses really in the United States. It was Lime Rock. What were the Laguna Seca and Road America, right? All in that same kind of calendar of time.
Yes.
And what year did you take over? Was that 1975? Was that you were?
Well, 1975 is when I started the racing school.
Right.
And that took me to the Lime Rock area. We ran at many, many tracks eventually, but Lime Rock was our home.
Home base, right.
Yeah. And though we didn't necessarily do more schools at Lime Rock than, say, at Laguna, right, but it was home.
Right.
And I got really nervous in the early 80s. There were a group of guys, fair enough, vintage racers, who I really appreciate, who wanted to buy Lime Rock. Good. I wanted it to be preserved. But their plans, I thought, were really unrealistic.
Right.
They wanted to keep it as a racetrack, but build a big conference center there and have the conference center really support the racetrack. Well, in this part of the world, there is no way a conference center is going to thrive or even survive.
Sure.
And so kind of in self-defense, I put together a group of 6 guys to buy the track before they did. None of us had any money.
Right. That's the best way to do it, right?
Well, we borrowed all the money.
Wow.
Including some from the guy who sold it to us. And off we went. Each guy had to make 2 mortgage payments a year. That's all we had.
Wow.
And over time, I discovered that I really enjoyed the process of running the racetrack. And slowly, my partners had other things to do in life, like dying.
Right. Pesky dying.
and so over many years, I bought them, including those guys, out.
Right.
And ended up owning it all myself, me and the bank.
Right. Yeah. And I can't imagine it's easy to go to the bank and tell them you want to buy a racetrack and they don't just jump up and down and throw money at you, right? I mean, you've got to really prove to them that you're going to have the wherewithal to get it back.
When I When I started the racing school, which was in 1975, I was still living in the Boston area before I moved down here. And I would go into the bank, the local branch of my bank, Boston-based bank, and say, gee, I need to borrow some money.
Right.
And they, of course, would say, what for? And I would say, I'm buying this car. And they would say, what are you going to do with the car? Well, it's a race car. Next question always would be, it's registered and insured, right? No. Where is it? It's in Belfast. That was the time. That was the time of the Troubles, and the car was made in Belfast.
Right.
And that's where this little factory was, the Crossley factory. And, and I'd get through that question maybe, and then the guy would say, the bank manager would say, and where's it going to be stored? And I'd say, oh, a place called Lime Rock. That's in Connecticut. And by that point, no insurance, no license plate, only one person fitting in it, not being within reach of the bank. They never heard of where it was going. Finally, the guy, the first time around, said, oh, okay.
We'll give you the money, right?
And I did that again and again as the school fleet grew. And it took me a while to learn that this branch of the bank was the training branch.
Oh.
So every time I got one of these guys with his 20 questions, it was a no guy.
Oh, no.
And I was the first idiot that he was being asked to lend money to.
Oh, man. Yeah, it made your task a little bit difficult, but probably good for you. It made you dot all your I's and cross all your T's, right?
And they made it possible.
How many? So you started out in the racing school. I mean, you had a handful of cars to begin with, and
to begin with, we ended up with over 100 single-seater cars,
wow,
and as many street cars. We ended up. I mean, we went through BMW, and we ended up with Chrysler, with Dodge actually, and we had a lot of Vipers.
Yeah, I was going to say the Vipers were important. And a Viper's got to be a lot of car for that track. That's got to be, you got to be on point to handle that track with a Viper, right?
Right. We have a small track that we then used to call our autocross track. We've made it a lot nicer and many optional corners. Now we call it the Proving Grounds very pretentiously. But we had Vipers and Neons.
And perfect.
Wait, it's actually really a good story. The Viper was the attraction, and everybody would get to drive the Vipers. But boy, we sold a lot of Neons.
Oh, I bet. Because they were easy to drive, right? I mean, you could be somewhat quick in a Neon, even if you weren't as skilled maybe as some of the other drivers, right?
Right. And consequently, maybe have more fun.
Well, it's funny when we have the autocross, the local region of the SCCA here at our place, invariably there's quite a few Neons that are in the SCCA local club that come out to autocross these cars, and they do pretty well. They seem to have, those and Miatas seem to be, and of course the Honda S2000, we've got to throw in there, is a little bit fancier than the Neon, but they seem to do very well. I guess they lend themselves well to some slight modifications that make them fun to drive.
And the Miata, that saved a lot of aspects of motorsports. I mean, it's not just that it looks like a little British, that it looks like a Lotus Elan.
Mm-hmm.
They're quite wonderful cars.
Right.
And particularly for the price. And everybody, it seems, uses a Miata for some hard driving activity.
Sure.
I mean, they've been a godsend to the sport.
Well, and they have a great sensation of speed because they're low center of gravity and everything low to the ground and all of that it really makes them fun to drive. Well, I always say that you can find the apex of the corner in a minivan if you want. I mean, it doesn't necessarily matter what you're driving as long as you're enthusiastically driving it, right?
Right.
But in the school days, you've got the school going on. I mean, did it seem like a long shot when you started it that is this going to make any money or is this going to do any good or am I going to get anybody to sign up?
I'm not even sure I was smart enough to ask that question.
Right.
I got involved because I liked cars, and I certainly by then I was had been racing for a while, and of course I loved that. And the school just seemed like kind of a neat idea. I didn't have a business plan.
Right.
I didn't know anything, and there were a couple of other schools, but nobody knew if it really could work. I had no idea I could make a living doing it.
Sure. And
I started with a partner who it turned out was very interested in police training and anti-terrorism, if that's a word, driving. And that was good because we were unsuitable partners. We just didn't approach things. He was a nice guy.
Right.
Didn't approach things the same way. And halfway through the first year, we agreed to split, and I would do the racing school part and he would do the chauffeur. Chauffeur's not a fair word.
Right.
He would do that kind of driving, defensive driving. And along that first year, I learned you really could teach people to drive. I didn't know that going in.
Sure.
I mean, every other sport has so many coaches and managers and there were a couple of schools out there on the other side of the country and in Canada. I had never seen one operate, didn't know anything about it. And the big discovery of the first year is you really could teach people how to do it. And we were dead serious about it. And we began to get applications from, Johnny Rutherford. We opened an envelope. He was the first star. We went on to have many. We opened the envelope and shook it out, and there was a check from this guy named Johnny Rutherford.
Wow.
we ended up, every year we'd have about a third of the starting field at the Daytona 500 and more than a third of the field at the Speedway.
Wow.
And everybody.
And did it give opportunities to drivers that may not have had the opportunity? Had you not existed, what would their path have been? Or you or any similar to you, what would their path have been? How would people get qualified to do this?
I don't know. They'd be accountants or mechanics, something really different.
Yeah, life would be a little bit boring. But it had to be a lot of fun to do that, though, and a lot of hard work, right?
Yes, but also very satisfying because you could do it.
Right. Yeah.
You could do it.
Were you able to spot raw talent immediately, or did you, was that part of what you could do? And did you know if a guy had the right stuff, so to speak?
Some guys you could spot. When Jeff Gordon came to the school at Road America in Wisconsin, and he wanted to be a road racer, by the way, not a stock car racer. Right. But he couldn't get a ride in road racing. You could really spot it there. But there are guys in all forms of motorsports that just worked hard at it.
Right. Yeah.
You can do that too. Just work and get pretty good.
And there's a lot of it's geometry, right? There's a lot of it that's just knowing angles and knowing the way to hit a turn and apexes and all that. You have to have the no fear factor as well too. But you got to know, if you hit the corner at a certain angle, then it's going to do X or Y or Z, right?
Yeah, you got to know that. A lot of that for some people is natural feel. That doesn't mean there's not a lot to learn.
Right. Well, it's like being a musician. Some guys can play the guitar without knowing music, and then there's guys that read music that are brilliant, and both ways are great. It's not.
Right.
In teaching somebody to drive, is it better to teach them in a spec type car or in something that they're more familiar with in their own driver? Is there any difference?
I don't think it matters.
Right.
If you're teaching a group, which is basically what racing schools do, they don't teach one person at a time. The cars have got to be the same.
Right.
That's the key thing. And it's nice if you can see the wheels going up. No, I'm serious.
I hear you.
A single seater's better. But think how staggering the concept is that you can teach somebody to be really good in a racing car while you're standing on the side of the road.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I mean,
Doesn't
I wouldn't
seem-
have believed it if we hadn't discovered that.
You'd almost feel like you'd need to be sitting next to him as like a rally driver and a navigator, telling him what to do next and how to do it. And for the NASCAR drivers, learning in an open-wheeled race car, was that a benefit to them to understand the dynamics of that?
Matter.
Didn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
I mean, you could do it in a pickup truck.
Sure. Did
driving's driving.
Right. And you see so many people that are successful in racing, but you also see so many people who are great drivers who maybe aren't quite as successful as they should have been for whatever reason. Danny Ungaius comes to mind, who was an amazing driver, everybody said, but he had, for whatever reason, his success didn't equate to his skill of driving, and maybe there's more to it than that being simplistic, right?
Yeah, I knew him, but not well enough to respond to what you're saying.
Sure. What? So you were an early member, I'm sure, of the SCCA and inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2013, I believe, with none other than Bobby Rahal and Carroll Shelby. That's an illustrious class to be with, right?
Right. For me, the big thing is in a couple of weeks, I get inducted into the I don't know if I have the name right, National Motorsports Hall of Fame.
Down in Daytona, right?
Yeah. That's kind of a big deal.
That's a big deal. In the sports car category, I understand that you're inducted, and that is really awesome. The list of the inductees in that realm are amazing. George Levy has done an amazing job with that, and it's really cool to see, and I congratulate you on that. That's got to be exciting.
I don't thank you. I've met him. He sure works hard at it. I don't know him beyond that.
Sure.
I have visited their place at the track at Daytona a few times, but I didn't really know much about the organization. They started back in the days of airplane racing.
Right.
And land speed record racing on the beach at Daytona. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's called motorsports. It's not called car.
Right.
And the idea is every year they take one person from each of their many categories, one drag racer, one stock car racer,
right,
one Indy car racer. They're going to run out of people at some time, I presume. I feel like a very late entry, but...
Well, sometimes they save the best for last, right? So
whatever.
So, with the SCCA, I was reading today, over 65,000 members they still have in the SCCA, which is, a testament to how well they have done with that program. And there's like 115 regional clubs, and they do everything from autocrossing to hill climbs, which are really cool. I didn't realize how cool the hill climb was until I went to the one in Reading that they race up to the pagoda and realized those guys are serious. It's not just a Sunday drive up the hill. It's serious racing.
That's where I tried to do my first competitive event living in Philadelphia at the time. And my very old MG blew up on the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
Oh, no.
And I have never seen the place.
Wow. Well, they did one in Hershey as well, too, I think, for a while. And I think, the powers that be said, wait a minute, maybe this is a little too much for what we thought it was. But it's still fun to watch and fun to see all the different types of racing. And I understand that Lime Rock's got a pretty interesting race coming up this year, more in the NASCAR world, right?
Yeah, we're having our first truck race.
Wow, that's cool.
It'll sound crazy to any listener, if you have any left.
You should come work for us.
NASCAR is really popular in New England. I'm not sure it is the way it was 20 years ago. This whole area, Long Island, full of family NASCAR teams running back then the Busch North Series.
Right.
And the rules never changed. You could be a mom pop team, and if you'd been in there you might have 8 engines eventually, and a spare car. And everybody that worked on your car was a volunteer. the guys you worked with during the day worked on your car at night, and they produced some tremendous drivers, and ran at Thompson and Stafford and up in New Hampshire, and eventually at Lime Rock, the Busch North finale used to be a road race at Lime Rock. They ran at Watkins Glen. That's the other road course they ran, and it was tremendous racing. I mean, produced some really good drivers. And our NASCAR race at Lime Rock, our only stock car race of the year, was a huge deal.
Sure.
And then NASCAR changed a lot of the rules. They expanded the areas. So Busch North now went to South Carolina and to Minnesota, I think.
Which is not north.
Now the guy that has a real job during the day, he can't go to those events.
Sure.
And then I have a lot of friends at NASCAR, so don't let me sound like the NASCAR bad guy here.
Right.
But then they decided to use that series as a feeder series. So you'd have a guy like Chip Ganassi running a car in it, which sounds great, but he'd be running some 16-year-old girl you never heard of. That was no good. Mm-hmm. And it died.
Right. Yeah.
And we had a event about 5 years ago to raise money. I don't remember what the good cause was, but we had Jeff Gordon here as our guest, and he drove people in the Camaro,
right?
And Rick Henrich was here, and I've never seen so many red hats in my life.
Wow.
And this is before anything political,
right?
We had a huge crowd,
right?
This was on a Wednesday afternoon or something,
right,
during the work week, and I hope it's still got that kind of following.
I would think it would. I mean, are you anticipating the truck race to be your biggest event of the year? Is that?
I think so. I think so. We're just getting started. It's been announced, but we had our first serious meeting yesterday with potential sponsors, and we're getting people interested. We have a labor union they're going to do it.
Sure.
And people that we never talked to at Lime Rock, and this might be huge.
Now they have interest. Now there's something that's got them interested. I mean, everybody has got in that part of the world has got to know about Lime Rock and know that it exists and know at its core what it probably is. But to really want to participate and to be almost soliciting themselves to come participate has got to be pretty refreshing for you.
Yeah, and they're bringing people from all over the Northeast. These are 500-person groups of clumps of hospitality, a lot of them, but they're not from down the street.
Right. So, and the truck race, you have an ARCA race and a truck race. Is that that's the idea? And then
late June, Friday and Saturday, the last weekend in June.
Oh, fantastic! And of course, anything that any of the events going on there, you obviously can find on your website, limerock.com, I believe it is.
Good enough.
Yeah, they'll find it if they Google it, right? So I got to ask the most important question on my list of questions to ask you, and that is, what, if any, significance did the sticker on the Seinfeld refrigerator have with the school and you back in the day?
The significance is it was a nice surprise.
Really?
Yeah. Seinfeld went to the school. He was, of course, working in California. And I mean, that's where they made his show.
Sure.
And when he went each time, he took his writers or some of his writers, and they went as a company outing. But he was dead serious about his driving, no question. And he is a real car guy. I mean, he's got I want to blow you away with one number.
Right.
When you were talking about the size of the SCCA,
right,
we had over 400,000 people go to the racing school.
Wow. Wow. That's shocking. I had no idea.
Yeah, and obviously many of them never ended up racing. They went to be better drivers on the highway, and then they sent their kids. We did a lot of programs for teenagers that had, been out of high school for a year, often referred to by their graduate father or mother. It was a big deal.
Yeah, and to have that, did you see a spike in business the minute that sticker showed up on that refrigerator, or was it just more exposure that just hard to quantify?
I don't know, but I didn't know about it right away. We didn't ask him or pay him.
Right.
Somebody at work turned on the television set the night before. Yeah, and there was this. Wait a minute.
That's classic. Of course,
it had to be helpful, but can't measure that.
Yeah, sure. So, perfect dovetail into my next question is what can we do to make driver's ed better in this country? How do we teach people to drive and handle a skid and do all the things that they really should know how to do instead of knowing how many points they get if they get caught with a beer driving?
Well, obviously, they need to spend more time in a car and less time in a classroom.
Sure.
And some drivers' ed programs are pretty good. I'm not knocking that. Some are useless.
Right.
One last story, and then I'll shut up. So the year we started the school, I told you I had a partner who was interested in safe driving.
Right.
And we got a contract that first year to shape up the New York State Police teaching programs for highway patrolmen. That sounded pretty neat.
Right.
It turned out our real job, took a while to realize this, was to refine the curriculum so they could do a better job of selling it to agencies and get more money to do programs. They weren't interested in
better quality.
What happens when a guy turns his hands too fast at 90 miles an hour on the New York thruway.
Sure.
How did I get on this subject?
I don't know. You're asking the wrong guy.
And the wrong guy is me.
Well, then it's a double net. So, we're talking about training, people beyond just to be racing drivers to defensive driving and all of that. Were the police officers generally as a whole, were they great drivers to begin with, or did they have a bunch of terrible habits and they weren't that good to begin with?
Can't answer that.
Yeah.
Generally, they were interested.
Right.
And I think generally they were pretty good, but this was much more about compiling information. We didn't get very far with making drivers better.
Be interesting to teach a guy to drive a limousine in a four-wheel drift or something, though, right? Some of these drivers for heads of states and presidents and all of that. They have
we did that. We did that.
Really?
We did Brinks drivers from all over the world. Wow. And we did best program I remember, I think was in Dubai, where it turned out, we thought we were teaching the big guy.
Sure.
We were teaching his chauffeur.
Oh.
And the big guy would sit in the back seat and help. Right? The chauffeur. Yeah, right.
Oh, that's funny. I imagine that teaching heel-toe braking in a Brinks truck ought to be an interesting class. Not one that there's no curriculum for that, right?
And fortunately not necessary.
Right, exactly. Well, I think that, you look at driving in general. I think generally everybody, all guys especially, think that we're all great drivers. I think that's got to be a hard thing to overcome in the beginning in a racing school, is that a guy thinks, I know how to do this. And then you teach him a few things, right?
Right. I taught all the schools at the very beginning. And then I found guys that could do it better than me. And then they recruited guys they raced against. And that's how we built a really big faculty. But at the beginning, I had the pleasure of watching some nice looking 16-year-old girl who just learned how to drive to come to the school. I don't know how she got there, but there she was. And there'd be some guy that would come in his driver's suit, some 50-year-old guy who would see this girl and, get blown away. And his mission was to show her, who was really good.
Right.
I don't know if it ever came to fruition.
Really?
Young girls that don't know anything about racing and women can really learn, like you can learn to dance.
It's a blank canvas, right? There's no preconceived notions, right?
And they're focused.
Yeah.
And the guy with his driving suit who was going to show off, the instructors would all look for, I hope the phone rings.
Please God, let the phone ring. How good were your instructors? Were they as good as the current crop of racing drivers that were out there in today? I mean, maybe in a different way.
They are.
They are. That's who they are now.
That's who they are. Yeah, they're all good racing drivers. Did you ever hear Dorsey Schrader?
Oh, I think I've heard of him. Yes, I believe that name sounds
Trans
familiar.
Am champion, driven for many good teams. At the very beginning, when wages were a lot lower,
right?
Dorsey worked for us during the week for $100 a day.
Right.
That was the standard instructor rate at the beginning. And Ford was paying him $1,000 a day. So he'd work for us through Friday, and then off he'd go someplace, either testing for Ford or racing for Jack Roush. And he'd get $1,000 a day, and Monday morning he'd show up. And
love it.
He took them both seriously.
Sure.
And those guys did the recruiting. I said earlier, that's how we built the faculty, the guys they raced against.
They knew who the right guy was
Yeah. Who would work hard was a big thing.
Well, sure. I mean, it's not an easy job, and it's got to be a little frustrating with people sometimes. You get a guy who's not listening or paying attention to what you're telling him, and you think, gosh, you're paying an awful lot of money here. Why don't you shut up and listen for a minute?
The shortcut for whether a guy was going to be a good instructor or not, when these guys reported back on who they wanted us to talk to about hiring, was he'll pick up cones. A lot of the exercises, of course, had corners outlined with cones.
Right.
And I literally remember the guy who said about Danny Sullivan, who worked for us after he won the 500.
Wow.
He'll pick up cones.
That meant he was a good guy, right? It meant he would go and do whatever it took to get the job done.
Do his part.
And I love that. I think that's. Did you drive at Monaco? Did I read that correctly? Did you race at Monaco at some point in time?
Almost.
Well, that's got to count for something, right?
Well, I drove a few slow laps. Did you ever hear of March, who were a Formula One manufacturer?
Absolutely.
They made more cars than any other company then. They wanted to get into the Formula 5000 business, which was basically a Formula One car with a Chevy in it.
Right.
And they picked me to be their North American driver. And they were meant to build a car in 1972, I think, for 1973. And I was to test the car in England, maybe race it a couple times over there. And I sat over there waiting for this car to be done, which ended up being a year late. And eventually, to appease the guys who owned my car, at that point, a March Grand Prix car from the previous year, which I was going to run a few times to get to know them and them know me and get to know the car. Anyhow, long story short, nothing ever got finished.
Oh, no.
And finally, they said to my group, we can finish a current car which was the 1972 March, we can finish that in time for Monaco. And everybody said, great. They didn't really kind of make that on time. And the car was done 3 days before. Yeah. So it went into the March tire truck.
Right.
And went to Monaco. I had not sat in it or in anything else like that.
Right.
And Monaco then had 2 practice and qualifying days, and they accepted more cars than they would start. That's when they'd take 20 cars and maybe start 60. I don't remember the numbers.
Sure.
The first day, I jumped in the car, full of enthusiasm, put it in first gear, and it wouldn't move.
Right.
And went up through the gearbox, and it wouldn't move. And we had hired a very famous English mechanic, a guy named Al Francis, historic guy, to do just the gearbox. Obviously, something went in backwards.
Right.
So the next day, I had a chance to try again. Me and Mario Andretti, who had failed to qualify the first day, but at least he did some laps. And it poured rain.
Oh, no.
I went out and did 2 laps. I was just curious to see where the track went. And I think I officially hold the lap record for the slowest lap. I'm serious.
Really? I love that.
Ever at Monaco.
Nice.
So, yeah, I raced at Monaco.
Yeah. Well, I love that, you know.
I didn't even get hot.
Yeah. Well, I just watched a miniseries about the greatest guy in the rain ever with Ayrton Senna racing back in the day in the rain. He loved the rain. He was one of those guys that loved it. So you've got some great events coming up. The Historics you do at Lime Rock every year, and the Sunday in the Park where you do the Concours d'Elegance and the whole car show, which is amazing. There's an aerial overhead picture of the park with all the cars lined up all the way around the track, and it's staggering how many cars you get at that event.
I think it's the best event in North America, but I'm extremely prejudiced.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I'm going to come this year and see it for myself. I'm excited to do that. We had Lowell Paddock on the show a couple of weeks ago and talked about the event and how successful it's become and the historics part of it. You know, our friend Harry Hurst has the Glory Days of Racing, and they talk about, you know, all the times that were the glory days and what made them the glory days back then. Which included, I think, the characters as much as anything. I mean, those guys, they don't seem to exist anymore like they did back then. Maybe we're just seeing it too close to the source, but sure doesn't seem like it used to be.
And a lot of people don't get close enough to the drivers.
Right. Yeah, there's not that opportunity.
You can't.
Yeah, it's a different world. And, you know, they could fly commercially back then and nobody even knew who they were back in the day, unless you were into racing or into that part of the sport. So,
yeah.
Well, it's certainly been fantastic having you on the show this morning. We really enjoyed it, Skip, and hope that we've covered all the good bases and then some. And look forward to seeing you at your place up there. And congratulations on the Motorsports Hall of Fame nomination.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take
and
care.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes on the Classic Auto Mall Show.
The Classic Auto Mall has more than 1,000 vehicles for consignment in our huge 8-acre climate-controlled showroom. It's a real indoor mall. If you'd like to know all the advantages of buying and selling a car through consignment, the information is available on our website, or you can talk to a classic car specialist who can answer all your questions. It's easy, safe, convenient, and it doesn't matter where you are. We sell worldwide. See our huge selection of classic and collectible vehicles at classicautomall.com.
And we're back with the Classic Auto Mall Show from the Classic Auto Mall studio in Morgantown, Pennsylvania. Well, we've outdone ourselves again with a fantastic guest.
Another big name,
but great stories.
Really good.
He's just love guys like that. They just can talk, and you can just ask them a question. And if they don't, they won't try to BS you. If he didn't know it or didn't want to answer it, he just said so. You know, right. I love guys like that. We should have more of that in this world. Honesty. Goodness, it's so good. So, where did we sell cars in the last 365 days?
Where? Take a deep breath.
York, Pennsylvania, Columbia, Missouri, 3, Annville, Pennsylvania, Collegeville, Pennsylvania, Cincinnati, Ohio, Spokane, Washington, Johnstown, New York, Los Banos, California, Nashua, New Hampshire, Houston, Texas, Westchester, Pennsylvania, Albion, New York, Gibsonia, Pennsylvania, Middleburg, Florida, Huntington Beach, California, Madison, Wisconsin, Perkasie, Pennsylvania, Souderton, Pennsylvania, Lansdale, Pennsylvania, Istanbul, Turkey, Brookhaven, Pennsylvania, Cannonsburg, Pennsylvania, Juneau Beach, Florida, Macon, Georgia, Street, Maryland, Valonia, Arkansas, Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, Orrville, Ohio, Landing, New Jersey, Maple Heights, Ohio, Linfield, Pennsylvania, Chester Springs, Pennsylvania, Hackettstown, New Jersey, Oak Harbor, Washington, Indy Atlantic, Florida, Wheeling, Illinois, Rancho Cucamonga, California, Hamilton, Ohio, Enola, Pennsylvania, New York, Reading, Pennsylvania, St. John's, Florida, Hamburg, Pennsylvania, Preston, Idaho, Brentwood, California, Drew Moore, Pennsylvania, Cardinal, Virginia, New Holland, Pennsylvania, Hudson, Ohio, Hedgesville, West Virginia, Tamaqua, Pennsylvania, Kenville, New Jersey, Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania, Renton, Washington, Biglerville, Pennsylvania, Somerville, South Carolina, Shelbyville, Indiana, Cleveland, Ohio, Wheaton, Illinois.
Do you smell that? That's Randy's computer smoking from putting all the dots on the map.
Ding, 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 ding. I don't know how I did that.
19 states and one foreign land.
I do not know how. I have a head rush right now. I have a little head rush. Wow. Maybe that's from no red wine, too.
Yeah.
If you'll notice I'm a little more svelte on camera, it's because, the no red wine.
That's right.
Yes. Illness will do that.
Illness will make you better or something like that. Oh, shout out to our friend up in Boyertown, Ross Myers, America's Most Beautiful Roadster for the second year in a row. Who does that?
Amazing.
Wow.
That's impossible. That's like winning the Super Bowl 3 times. Oh, that would be the Kansas City Chiefs. That would be like so many things that you don't. Yeah, yeah. Don't get so cocky there, Mr. H.
Oh, that's right. You're from Missouri. I forgot.
That's right. Doesn't mean you don't know who I'm rooting for. No. So anyway, Ross Myers, 1936 Ford Roadster at the Grand National Roadster Show, won America's Most Beautiful Roadster again for the second year in a row, and I think he won the Riddler also. So
he did.
You guys kind of got it down, right?
Yep.
So new arrivals this week. We'll go through these pretty quickly.
Okay.
Since I'm way behind.
Nope, we're fine.
1969 Chevrolet Corvette Coupe Fathom Green over green, 53,630 actual miles, garage kept, numbers matching 400 horse, 427 L68. This is a beast. Correct turbo hydromatic 400 automatic. Correct heavy-duty 3.08 posi axle, and the correct carbon intake. So this thing's got all the right boxes checked.
And the right body style. I like that
right body. That's a pretty cool body
style.
Till
it went to the malaise period.
Yeah, it went for a while that nobody cared about that C3s, but they've come on quite strong. The latter part of the C3s maybe weren't so great, but again, beautiful cars. We always say this. Just because they were underpowered doesn't mean they still weren't striking looking.
It's true.
So another new arrival, which is another Model T, which I don't talk about very often, but we keep getting these spectacular Model Ts.
It's true. Black
over black, beautifully restored, tons of brass, 177 cubic inch 4-cylinder, 2-speed planetary transmission. Awesome. And it's got the Ford toolkit included as well.
Such a cool car.
Yeah, it's amazingly done, and we're seeing more and more of these Model Ts that are so expertly restored. It's hard to believe. You didn't see them for a long period of time, and now they seem to be making a renaissance here. So
this one's like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, only better.
Yeah, exactly. Really? How about the 1971 Plymouth Duster 340 Tribute? Curious yellow. That's curious. Over black. Nicely done Tribute. 340 cubic inch 4-barrel V8. Factory high impact car. A727 automatic. Solid example. What's a factory high impact car?
I was going to ask you that.
I don't know. I really don't.
I have no idea.
Did you?
No, I didn't.
I don't either. I don't know what it means. So somebody, podcast at classicautomall.com.
Yes.
Answer that question.
Maybe they thought it would just get a lot of talk like the Roadrunner did.
I guess. How about the 2012 Ford Mustang Boss 302, Kona Blue over charcoal black? We seem to get one of these about every 3 or 4 months come through the door, and they're great cars.
It's the boss.
It's the boss. Car number 18 of the 44 pre-production models, 31,000 actual miles, one of 3 left, supposedly. 5-liter Roadrunner V8 and a Tremec 6-speed manual. Lots of documentation on this car. It's a great car and a great example and a fun car to own.
And really, just it's a pre-production boss, but it has everything. That ended up in the regular bosses. There's nothing. There's nothing abnormal about. Like I was looking for Easter eggs and things like that on it.
It's got
something
everything oddball that you wouldn't normally see on another car.
Maybe there isn't, and it just doesn't show.
Well, it very well could be, and things that they maybe didn't even release to the public because they wanted to test without being obvious for whatever reason. And how about this? A 72 Ford Bronco. We don't see any of these lately, do we? My goodness, Barrett-Jackson and Mecum, they're two big sales.
Still hot.
So in Mecum in Kissimmee and Barrett-Jackson in Scottsdale, almost over 6,000 cars offered at those two sales collectively. All 2,000 of the ones at Barrett-Jackson were no reserve. And there was Bronco after Bronco after Bronco after Scout after Blazer after Bronco after Corvette. Yep. It was crazy, but the Broncos are strong. But this one, this 72 Bronco that we have, black over black, 53,000 actual miles. This is more reasonable than most of the ones you've seen on TV. The price point is much more in line with what you would expect it to be. Yeah. Not 100 plus like you see a lot of these. So 3 owners from new, the original 302 cubic inch V8, known history, 3-speed manual. It's got a fiberglass body, so it's like almost like a kit, but not. Yeah. But interesting vehicle.
Watching those auctions, it's amazing how many different Bronco builders there are around the country, all doing like fine work, and we get some of them here. But it's incredible what's coming through the line.
The level of detail and craftsmanship on these cars is second to none. I mean, it's just really spectacular.
I wonder if Ford had an idea that these little runabouts were going to be.
I don't think so. But although they did re-release the Bronco, and now it's become its kind of own subset of Ford. Now the Bronco has become a whole, whatever you want to call it, sub-model, if you will.
Yep. Well, and they're more tough than like the Suburban. I forget the Ford name for the big stretch.
Expedition.
And the Excursion and all of those. Still love the Excursion though. Still, those are cool.
Well, and price wise.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Last but not least, the 1957 Chevrolet Corvette convertible, Venetian red over red. This thing. High dollar restoration. Oh man. AACA senior first, correct 283, 270 horse V8. This car is striking. Muncie M20 manual, 370 posi axle. It's nearly flawless.
I think we had this one on display at the Philly Auto Show, and it is.
Oh, we did.
It got a lot of eyes.
A lot of eyes, and it was on that red carpet, which you would think would be not good, but it was actually good.
Yeah, a little bit of contrast there.
It made it a little contrast. And we were just talking about earlier the 1954 Mercedes that RM just sold, the Stromlinen Wagon, the W196, $53,200,000 with the buyer's premium.
Sure.
That gets 2 of these.
Yeah. Highest price ever paid for a Grand Prix car. Second most expensive vehicle ever sold at an auction, which was first was another Mercedes-Benz. The SLR 300 went for $142 million. But this one was driven by Juan Manuel Fangio. It was from the Indianapolis Speedway Museum. It was a one-car auction in Stuttgart at the Mercedes-Benz Museum that they had. So, I mean, you imagine having a whole event and inviting thousands of people for one car. That's it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And they should have done that with the Ford GT, but...
yeah, exactly. Or the Porsche 917.
That's what I meant, Porsche 917.
Yeah, well, maybe they think that there's a lot of things they should have done with that, so who knows. What's interesting about this car, though, is that it's this Stromlinen Wagon, 2.5-liter straight 8, 280 horsepower. So not a lot of power relative to today, but back then, 280 horsepower on a car that was, lightweight metal, and I guess it's aluminum.
Yeah, I think it is. It's one of one. Is it one of one?
Yeah, one of one or one of very few.
Yeah.
And it probably couldn't weigh more than, 1,500 pounds or something with the driver. So 280 horsepower becomes a whole different ball of wax when you're talking about a weight of that versus a weight of a normal passenger car that weighs 4,000 pounds with 280 horsepower, which is still not nothing.
Right.
I'll bet at that sale they had really good hors d'oeuvres and an open bar.
I bet you they had a big old open bar, don't you think? And I imagine that somebody probably bought it that wasn't even in the room.
Yeah.
Some guy on the telephone who didn't want it to be known who he was and where he was.
Well, he's too busy.
And so,
he's too busy to be there.
Well, and some people don't want, some people want to show off their possessions, and others do not want to show off their possessions, and good for them. So there was a museum I almost got to go to if I had been in Scottsdale this past couple of weeks. That would have been really cool. So I missed that.
Yep.
Very private collection that nobody gets to see.
Ooh.
And I got a call from a guy, and he said, "Is that you in front of me walking?" I go, "Where are you walking?" He goes, "Well, I'm in Scottsdale." I go, "Well, probably not because I'm in Philly." And he goes, "Oh, man, I was going to invite you to see X's museum in Scottsdale. And any of you car guys will probably know who it is when there's a secret private Uber.
It's a private collection.
Can't say.
Got to be more than one in Scottsdale.
I would think that there's quite a bit of money in Scottsdale.
A few cars.
Yeah, a few cars that are out there.
Sun City.
Yeah, I think a few cars that have been sent out there. My grandfather lived in Sun City, Florida, which was kind of the same thing. Everybody had a two-car garage with a golf cart garage. So you had the 2 cars that you parked in there, and then the golf cart, which you took to dinner and the restaurants. And I asked my dad, I said, so Sun City Center sounds like a hopping place to go. Dad said, yeah. He said, we went out for cocktails, dinner, after dinner drinks, and dancing, and we were home by 6:45.
But in Florida, Sun City, the cars will rust just sitting in the garage.
That's true. I see cars that are parked under these buildings in South Florida that are on the oceanfront buildings, and they're parked under a covered garage, but it's not completely contained garage.
Air.
And they have the level of stuff on them, sand and salt and grit, that I don't know how you ever get off without scratching the paint.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's frightening.
You ever see the aircraft graveyard out near Tucson?
I've driven past it, but I never stopped.
We actually went in and looked around. It was like, wow, pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But the stuff just sits there for decades.
For decades and decades. So, anyway, thanks for joining us on the show. Show number 179 is in the can, as we like to say, and another great guest. And find us on YouTube and all the TikTok and all the different podcast sites and Facebook. Go like us on Facebook. We kind of stagnated on Facebook. We need some help there.
Yeah.
Y'all go out and bump that up, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because that's how we know that you're paying any attention to us. So thanks again, and we'll catch you next week on the Classic Auto Mall Show.
You've been listening to the Classic Auto Mall Show with your host, Stewart Howden, executive producer Steve Safir, produced and engineered by yours truly, J.R. Russ. Available on ClassicAutomall.com, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Music courtesy of the Pat Travers Band. For tour dates, contact, and stuff, visit PatTravers.com. Produced by Car Smarts Media. Copyright all rights reserved.